What's up, guys? My name is Dean, or as most of you know me, Twisty, and it is time to get into the round 18 wrap-up for this AFL season. That was really quick, but let's get into it anyway. Let's take a look at the ladder to begin today. The Hawks, 2 games clear, not one, but 2 games clear on top of the ladder, of course. And then you've got one. This is percentage again, separating 2nd and 7th after a couple of upsets, a couple of maybe upsets, and then North Melbourne, a game behind the Dogs. They're in 8th position. And then you've got St Kilda, who are the astronomical anomaly here that could, in fact, make that top 8 if they win. How many games are left? 5. So they've probably got to win 4 of their next 5 games to make the top 8. You would think in North Melbourne can only win 1. And they have a tough run home, North Melbourne. So St Kilda give themselves every opportunity this week with a win to get themselves into that finals position. And it'll be interesting to see who they play off against, because there is almost, 2 goals in percentage between Sydney, Geelong, and West Coast. So the Swans are about a kick and a half ahead of Geelong, and Geelong are about, a kick ahead of the West Coast Eagles. So a goal each way in any sort of result this weekend could sway that percentage enough to either put you inside the top 4 or, keep you outside the top 4. So it's just a crazy ladder at the moment, and every single score that you do matters. And the Hawks, go home, Hawthorn. Anyway, let's get into the games. Collingwood, North Melbourne on Friday night. A lot of people expected Collingwood to win this game, but North Melbourne finally got themselves back on track. They now have won 2 of their last 7. So after breaking a 5-game losing streak, they win this one. Lindsay Thomas kicked 5 goals, was pretty much getting a lot of those goals late in the match when it was pretty much over. But North Melbourne started really well here, and they sort of maintained that lead or kept them at arm's length pretty much for the majority of the match, and then pushed it out towards the end of the game. But the problem for North Melbourne is, while they are playing, pretty good football against these bottom sides, they haven't shown it too many times against the top teams, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But if Daniel Wells didn't play, like he had a calf injury or a back injury that was causing a calf injury pre-game, if he didn't play, then I hazard to think how terrible their start would have been, because he was outstanding in that opening term, Wells, and he is critical to them winning the flag this year. So they need him fit and ready. They need all of their players fit and ready if they are going to make a run at the flag this year, North Melbourne, or if they're even going to stay in the top 8 this year, North Melbourne. Next game, we've got almost an upset. The first of 2 almost upsets. The Swans and the Blues at the SCG. Inaccurate kicking costing the Swans, but they, in the end, got the job done by those 6 behinds. So they beat Carlton, who were pretty gallant, pretty good on the day. And I was quite surprised that Sydney were able to hold off in the end, because Carlton were coming. And they have been failing to win these sort of games in the past. I think they've already lost 3 this year. Within the last 90 seconds. So, finally, Sydney get a win in one of these really tight games and maintained that lead. I think Longmire put a couple of players on the bench and just did not let them off. I think Dean Towers was one of them, who's made a couple of errors in a couple of those games that they've lost late. So, very much just saying, get the kids off the ground, let the older blokes do it. And they got the job done. And Kennedy was outstanding. 35 touches, and I think more than 20 of those were contested balls. So he's a gun. Of course, he's a gun. And Cripps was pretty good for Carlton as well as Simpson and Gibbs. They're always good, though. Their top end's always pretty good. Let's look at the Gold Coast Suns beat the Fremantle Dockers now. 24 points in the end. Lynch kicked 4, Day kicked 4, and Wright kicked 3. So between their 3 big key forwards, they kicked 10 goals. Actually, that's 11 goals. My calculations are off, aren't they? And Walters was pretty good for the Dockers. I think Pavlich will play 350 next week, if I'm not mistaken. But Lachie Neale, he just finds so much of the ball, it's ridiculous. He gets 35 plus every week. So this is another 40 plus game for him, and he's done pretty good. And, Shane Yarran came in for the Dockers. He was pretty good as well. So they'd be impressed with him for the future. Now, let's keep going on. Let's go to Twilight on Saturday. West Coast take on Melbourne. And the Eagles only got home by a goal in the end. This was a really tough encounter for them. Melbourne pretty much held a lead majority of the game. And then sort of faded late in the third quarter or in the last quarter a little bit to sort of drop it by just a little bit. And the Eagles were able to push forward and kick a winning score. But that being said, Melbourne had their chances. They kicked 12 behinds, 8 goals. I think it's been made a lot of this week that teams will now need to employ like full-time goal-kicking coaches because it wins you games and it loses you games if you can't kick straight. So Jones pretty good. Viney was great as well, and so was Dommy Tyson there getting the 3 leading ball winners. Prentice had 10 tackles in the first quarter, ended up with 15 for the West Coast, and they just needed to win. That's all they needed to do. They need to win, but they're going to need to get to a stage at one point where they're going to need to win and win well, because that percentage is critical between them being inside the top 4 and not. So that is critical, especially right now. You can be second or you can be 7th, depending on how big your percentage is. But let's move on. Saturday night, the first of the 2 Saturday night games, the Dogs were upset by St Kilda, who kept their finals hopes alive, and it was a really disappointing night for the Dogs. Had a couple of injuries. Redpath went down with an ACL injury, and Mitch Wallace also had a broken leg injury, which is just very, very sad for the Dogs. They've had so many injuries this year, and they've managed to stick through it. But I just think this might be the straw that breaks the camel's back and sort of just sends them on a downward spiral towards the end of the season, which is really disappointing because they've had such a good year. I hope they can continue to maintain their form, but I can't see it happening throughout the final series. I think it's going to be a disappointing end of the year for the Western Bulldogs. But let's talk about St Kilda. How bloody good are they? Jack Stephen had 39 disposals. Again, another almost 40 game. He's had, I think, 3 or 4 35 pluses this year. So he is outstanding, Jack Stephen. And he just gets so many meters with his kicks. He just bangs it long every time. You know he's always going to use the ball and be damaging when he gets the ball. So that's the good thing about Jack Stephen. He might actually be a smoky for the Brownlow. But 15-point winners St Kilda. They keep their finals chances alive. They're going to need to win more games in North Melbourne. They're going to need to win 3 more games in North Melbourne because they're 2 behind them. So they've got a couple of big weeks coming up. Next, when is the St Kilda North Melbourne game, Dean? Look it up, please. It is Saturday night at Etihad Stadium next week. This is the match of the round because of the implications that it has. St Kilda win, they're then only a game outside the 8. Obviously, they're like 20 percentage behind. So, that being said, North Melbourne have 4 top 8 teams on the run home. St Kilda only have, North Melbourne is one of them, and then they've got just Sydney, I think. So, if they can beat North Melbourne, win the other 3 games, St Kilda are in the finals. And wouldn't that be a story in itself? St Kilda playing finals footy. Let's look at the Coleman. Kennedy 1 in front of Buddy going into round 19 here. And Tommy Lynch just the 3 goals behind. So he's still a small chance of getting that as well. So it's pretty much a 3-horse race at the moment. Everyone else is very far down the line. Now Geelong finally got a good victory here over the Adelaide Crows. 30-point winners. The last time the Crows lost was to the Cats at Adelaide Oval. Sorry, not Amy Stadium. What am I thinking, Dean? At the Adelaide Oval. But the Cats have got the job done by 5 goals in the end. Menzel, I thought, was probably the most dangerous forward on the ground. Just looked like he was going to clunk it every time he went near it. Hawkins kicked 4 goals as well. He was pretty good. Dangerfield, always special. I mean, you just understand. But the Crows, the problem is they've got such a dangerous forward line. But if their forwards don't function, then that's where their weaknesses lie. Because, Tex Walker doesn't have a good game, didn't kick a goal. Eddie Betts only kicks a 1. Jenkins kicks his 3. Most of those over the back as usual. And Lynch kicked a couple there. So they're your 4 forwards, and they've kicked 6 of your 7 goals between them. You're probably going to need a Sloan to kick a couple, or a Douglas to push forward. You need those goal-kicking midfielders which is something that Geelong can do with Dangerfield, can kick a couple of goals. Bartel can swing forward and kick a few. So it's something you need to work on maybe. I think that's probably Adelaide's little bit of weakness, is that they're too reliant on their forwards getting the goals. I mean, Hawthorn's done forward line for a number of years, and they've done the job for them. So anyway, Geelong was pretty good in that one. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way that went out. Let's move on to the next game of the round. This was Essendon and the Brisbane Lions, 12-19-91. So 31 scoring shots for the Bombers, 28 for the Brisbane Lions, and yet it seemed to be a 37-point differential. They've got a kick straight, the Bombers. They've been the worst conversion side in 30 or 40 years, I think. Whether that's just their lack of class or just really poor set shots. And Danaher wasn't even a culprit. He kicked 4-1, so he kicked straight. Fantasia, normally he does similar. He kicked 2-1. So, yeah, it's just something that they've got to work on. I think there was a number of just stray kicks at goal that should really be done well. And Brisbane, they get a weight lifted off their shoulders. You know, they got the win. They're not going to win the wooden spoon. And Rockcliffe, pretty happy with the way their team went and rallied behind Justin Lepich. So now it is time for me to present to the Essendon Football Club the wooden spoon. So here you go, the Bombers. You can take this one home with you. That is a souvenir for you and that's the first time for like 80 years Essendon's won a wooden spoon or something ridiculous like that. But keep going. Sunday as well. Hawthorn smashed Richmond by 70 points. It wasn't actually too much at three-quarter time, was it? I thought it was pretty close. I thought it was like 3 goals at three-quarter time. It was about 28 points at three-quarter time. And then it blew out to 70 points. So I thought Richmond were pretty poor toward the end of the game. I thought it was a pretty low skill level game for the majority of the first 3 quarters. It was pretty rubbish. I mean, you could see there's so many behinds. At half-time, it was 4-11 to 3-7. There was 7 goals, 18 kicked between the two clubs. And then I think they ended up with the set shots being like 6 goals, 15 or something from set shots for the day. So it's just pretty rubbish from both sides in terms of their goal kicking. Sam Mitchell was, I thought, the best person on the ground. He was fantastic in his 300th game. Had 38 disposals. I thought Martin was pretty good as well. Dimmer didn't seem to think so, but I think Dustin Martin might get the 2 votes in this game. He just had a game-high contested possessions, game-high clearances. He just looked like a beast in the middle of the ground, and really, the only problem was that, you know, Richmond would go forward and there'd be no one to kick to. They'd just mess up the kicks. So that was really their problem, just their problem going forward. Hawthorn, they're going for the flag. Richmond, they're playing the kids. So I was kind of happy with how we went anyway for 3 quarters, and then I was like, yeah, well, may as well leave. It was freezing at the G yesterday, and it wasn't even that windy, so I don't know what was contributing to the goal-kicking issues that much. It was windy in the first quarter, but it pretty much died down after that, so must have just been some poor play by some teams. But the final game of the round, Port Adelaide and the GWS Giants. The Giants got home to kill any chance a Power had of a finals berth this season. Ebert kicked 4 for the Power. Robbie Gray also very good there with the 3 goals. And then for the Giants, Smith, Cameron Shield, and I think a couple of others kicked 2 goals as well. So they're very good, the Giants, and this is a good win for them on the road, something that they haven't been able to do too much over the past couple of seasons. Obviously, they're a very new club, but in their emerging season this time around, they haven't actually been able to perform that greatly on the road, and I think this win sort of solidifies their finals position, and they're currently in second spot. And let's take a look at the Giants' run home. They play Richmond next week at home. Could be a big percentage booster again to keep them in that second position. Then they play the Gold Coast Suns, another win. Then they play West Coast at home, Fremantle at home, and then in round 23 they play North Melbourne away. So you'd think they'd win at least 4 of those games. West Coast and Freo at home, Richmond at home, and then I think North Melbourne away is probably going to be their biggest struggle for the rest of the season. But if they can win all those 5 games, they've got a top 2 finish. They've got a home final, and the Giants are suddenly a real big premiership threat. I mean, they score heavily. Their midfielders kick goals. Like Devon Smith, he kicks goals. Dylan Shield, he kicks goals. That's something that the Adelaide Crows don't do as well. And let's look at the top 8 v top 8 now, just to finish off today. We've got Geelong on top, 7 wins against top 8 sides with the 2 losses. The Hawks there, 5 and 3. Sydney, why haven't I moved Sydney up from last week? That's pathetic, Dean. But look at this. St Kilda in 9th position have a better record against the top 8 teams than West Coast do. So St Kilda are 2 and 6. And West Coast are 1 and 5. St Kilda's played more top 8 sides than a team that was in the grand final last year. I think West Coast play a couple of top 8 sides come later on in the last like 4 or 5 rounds. So that'll be real big test of their thing. But St Kilda, they're a smoky. They could do it, and they know they can knock off teams. So if they bring that pressure and intensity, I don't see why they can't do it. So I'm hoping the Saints can get a couple of wins. I'm hoping they can beat North Melbourne on Saturday night. It's going to be a ripping game. But I'll see you guys on Friday for the round preview. If you want to see more, I'll have a mission up later today. And then we'll go from there. So thank you guys for watching so much. Sorry it was a bit longer than normal, but I wanted to make sure I got everything covered. So thank you so much for watching. Leave a big thumbs up. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Have a good Monday. Happy Monday.